So, hello everybody, you're very welcome back to Law Hero. My name is Jen and my field is about the law and all things associated with the law. And I also look a lot into books around sociology, psychology, that kind of thing, because I believe if you don't know or aren't armed with education around these areas, you're destined to be caught in certain habit loops simply because you don't understand what's happening around you. So I'm a real advocate for education of all areas of life, but I have to admit my personal favorite is psychology and kind of looking at human behavior, and I think that kind of ties into being a lawyer actually. But anyway, today we're not gonna linger too long because I read the book Rainy Brain, Sunny Brain by Elaine Fox, who's actually from Dublin. I think she's from Clontarf actually. And I think she was at the University of Oxford and then she was in the States as a professor. And I really loved the book. I thought it was excellent, excellently written and researched. And yeah, I'm just gonna go into the salient points from that book because, I mean, the ultimate question is, are we making ourselves unhappy, and are we able to change the neuroplasticity of the brain and set up new neural pathways in order to change our habits? And we all fall foul of certain unhelpful habit loops in the brain and thought patterns that aren't helpful for us or our progression. So that's why I think if you're going through that or if you need some insight, today's video might help. So the first point is perception is the lens through which we view the world. And psychological science has established that how we interact with the world changes how the world responds to us. So if you just think about that for 1 second, how we interact with the world changes how the world responds to us. And if you are of an anxious disposition, you will shift towards the negative, and if this is prolonged, it can actually change the structure of the brain, which is crazy. So your thinking can actually make you sick. The author argues that personality has a lot to do with the way you think, and she argues that, you know, if you are of certain traits, for example, you're outgoing, you're conscientious, you know, you have these certain personality traits, that actually fosters optimism, because what it does is it puts you in a relationship with the rest of the world that is quite constructive rather than destructive or pessimistic. And it creates a kind of a positive loop in that the more you meet people, the more confidence you get, the more your world broadens, because basically what negativity and pessimism does is narrow your mindset and also narrows your opportunities. So what she argues is that the more optimistic, altruistic, outgoing kind of people, they create opportunities for themselves by being of that demeanor, which she argues it does come from your personality, but it can also be a choice, which is quite interesting. The fundamental truth is that for any living creature, the best way to maximize survival is to approach good things like food and sex and avoid dangerous things like predators and poison. The rest of our behavior and the complexity of our lives are rooted in these tendencies to move towards pleasure and away from pain. So if you look at any human behavior around you today, for example, I challenge you to watch people and think to yourself, are they motivated by moving towards pleasure or moving away from pain? The author talks about the importance of memory and notes that rather than presenting us with an honest and accurate account of things in the past, our memories provide us with a highly selective version of events that fit neatly into our outlooks and interests. And this is commonly known as confirmation bias. So for example, if you're convinced that women drivers are worse than men drivers, you will confirm that belief by noticing lots of examples of women driving poorly. What you fail to miss is the examples of men driving poorly, because those examples don't fit into the belief which you have told yourself. And if you have listened to my other YouTube videos, I talk about shortcuts and Malcolm Gladwell's assessment of the human brain making shortcuts because we want to conserve our energy. And confirmation bias is just one of those neat little packages we use to conserve our energy, because otherwise, were we to look at the nuance of everything, decisions would take too long. And then in the confirmation bias vein, the author talks about the placebo effect, and actually the Latin for placebo means I will please. And what that does is it creates a belief that a certain drug or medical treatment will do a job, even though it's usually just a sugar pill. The lesser known and darker twin is the nocebo effect, and that means I will harm. And the author gives an example of a man in America who was told by a voodoo doctor that he was going to die, and actually caused his own symptoms of illness. And then the only way to reverse this belief that he was going to die was to put another curse on him, which he pulled through. So expectation alone can literally make people sick. And in 1996, the American Medical Association reported that women who believed that they were more prone to heart disease were 4 times more likely to die than women who did not have that belief. Then moving on to the whole like optimism, pessimism thing. Optimists usually have great enthusiasm and energy, and they're willing to accept and relish that all life has to offer. And savoring pleasure and learning how to savor small pleasures is one of the most useful tools in life, simply because of the longevity of life. Indeed, like if you can find the good in any day or the silver lining, that is actually a skill that can be practiced over time, and it will contribute to your resilience. And the thing is, the more pleasure you can create for yourself in small things, it's like a currency that keeps coming back for more. Because what we do is we are able to somehow pull through the worst of situations. And if you think back to like Nazi concentration camps and Viktor Frankl, what he did in order to pull through that horrible experience was to focus on the small acts of kindness of the people in the concentration camp, and that gave his life meaning. And when he had meaning, he was able to psychologically pull through that. Now, that being said, he was a psychiatrist, so he did have the mental tools to pull through such a horrific ordeal, and like that is arguably why he survived the concentration camp, whereas like people who were around him lost all meaning in life, and that's why they died. Obviously everybody was malnourished and everything like that and cold, but they were all experiencing the same environment, yet he was able to pull through because he was so strong mentally. And basically the author says that like all mental illnesses is a dysfunction in the pleasure response. It's like it's the root of schizophrenia, it's the root of depression. And that's why the pursuit of happiness only by means of pleasure is generally a futile exercise, because what you have to do is accept that things aren't always going to be great, but that you have the capacity and the optimism to find that silver lining in the bad times, just like Viktor Frankl did. The next point the author makes is that actually human beings have an optimism bias, and she actually illustrates it quite well by saying like, you believe you're a good driver, and what most people do is they think that they will live longer and happier lives than the people around them. And it is generally accepted that most people overestimate their chances in life, which is really interesting. It's actually a survival mechanism. And there's also a very funny example in the book where men overestimate how appealing they are to women, and the misinterpretation of female friendliness for flirting I found very funny. Basically that if a woman responds in a friendly manner to a man, he's more likely to take it up as being flirtatious rather than kindness or civility. He then argues that the reason that men have this tendency towards optimism with women is because men are limited in the number of people they can meet from an evolutionary perspective, and there is a high cost of missing out on an opportunity, while the pain of rejection is short-lived and not overly costly. So the author quotes a study where there was a similarity between students who had greater psychological stress at university and a poor immune system functioning. So basically it meant that the more psychological stress they had, the more adverse effect it had on their immune system. And I think we all know this intuitively. However, what was interesting was that when the stressful period was over, the student's immune system returned to its normal level. And because of their high engagement in the previous years, the short-term cost of bad health, followed by longer-term gains, reconciled the apparently complex relationship between optimism and physical health. So this is interesting, and it kind of goes to the theory of like stress and oscillation. So what it means is a certain, and I say this all the time to the people I teach, is that a certain amount of stress will cause growth. For example, you'll grow your business, you'll grow your muscles, you'll grow your fitness. But what's really important is to take time afterwards to rest and let that growth sink in and let the body return to its optimal state, because otherwise you're going to be in a constant state of distress, which is suboptimal. So then the author goes on to talk about fear, and she talks about that we are afraid because we run and not the other way around. So she's talking about the bodily responses to fear, or the fear that comes from the body in the first place and then leads to thoughts. And an interesting point she notes is that people who are far more in tune with their bodily sensations experience stronger feelings of fear. So those who are able to judge their heartbeat very well will feel much stronger feelings of anxiety and fear than other people. Create this sense within you that you're in some kind of control of your bodily function when you're in some distress state, that your emergency triggers will get overly triggered and you'll become like desensitized to emergency warnings because they're going off all the time. And what that will do is lead you to a more pessimistic demeanor, because you're in a constant state of distress. And I actually mentioned it the other day when I was talking about the difference between stress and pressure. Pressure should be something that comes the odd time, given a certain environment, like a deadline or an exam. You're under pressure, like time pressure, for example. Stress is a lack of resources and is a normal functioning, you know, it's a normal part of being a human. But if you're constantly under pressure and these emergency response is going off on you all the time, that's what leads to mental health problems. Stress per se isn't bad, it's pressure is actually the problem, and nobody performs well under pressure long term. They just don't. Some people say they do, but they don't. And then she talks about one of the proven ways to overcome fear and anxiety is through exposure therapy, which is a highly effective treatment to force people to confront their fears. And basically what happens, and I found this very interesting, is something called the extinction. And basically it cannot not occur that your fears will not become extinct after becoming exposed to them over multiple times. This goes for phobias and whatnot, and it's been proven through science. So I think in conclusion, from everything I've read in this book, definitely it gives me hope, and I hope it gives you hope, that the brain is malleable and we actually have far more control over our destiny than we would like to think. It's a bit like, I remember when I was reading existentialism, the tragedy of life is that we have more control than we like to believe. It's much easier for us to say, oh, that was left to chance, or what will be, because we hate to think that we are actually the architects of our own demise. And it's completely understandable. Nobody wants to self-assassinate. But I think what the book shows us is that, contrary to a lot of what we believe, a pessimistic mindset and a pessimistic demeanor causes bad mental health, causes illness in the body. And then seeing the glass half full and seeing a positive spin on everything creates resilience. It means that you'll be more open to opportunity and will live a more varied life because of this broadened horizon. So on that happy note, I will leave you with that. I hope you get through whatever is faced with you today and for the next few months, and I'll see you in the next one.